Hey guys, and welcome back to lesson 2. So today we're going to be doing CSS. So what is CSS? Well, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, which basically means it's how you style an HTML page, but it works inherently. So we're going to get into that a little bit more later because it's pretty difficult to explain without an example. We're going to be covering CSS selectors, we're going to be covering inheritance, basic rules, complexities, and of course the actual file type that we're going to be using. Now, first off, let's go into our folder which contains our website. We see we still have index.html with our website in it. I'm going to close this down. And then we're going to do the same as we did last time. We're going to go new, we're going to go text document. And again, we're going to change the file extension. We're going to call this one, you can really call it anything, but for simplicity, I'm going to call it style CSS. And press enter. We're going to get this, boom. Okay. Now you'll see it's changed to Cascading Style Sheet Document. Okay. Then what you can do is just like before, you can just open this with Sublime Text or Notepad++, whatever it is that you're using. And there you see we have our actual HTML file and our style. So the first thing you're probably thinking, oh, what about if I want to add like a funky background or change color? What can I do with CSS? You can really do a lot of things with CSS. I'm going to show you a quick example of a website, and this is just a semi-basic website when it comes to styling. This is my own, and everything you see on screen is more or less done with styling. And there is a decent amount of JavaScript involved, but I did most of this with styling. And I'm not going to split the element because it's going to probably freak some of you out. But when we get into the later lessons, we're probably going to be doing that more and more. We're going to be inspecting elements and finding out what's wrong with our code. If you look at this page, you're going to see there's a nav bar. When you hover over it, there's some funky stuff happening. This is all CSS. The color, the background when you hover over it. The sliding here is JavaScript, but more or less most of it here is CSS. The JavaScript animates the CSS. You've got this column here, column, and you've got another column here. Those are both CSS. The CSS here, there's shadows, more CSS, underline CSS. Image, that's HTML. We're going to be going over that when we start doing our website in lesson 3. You've got a border, CSS. Font size, CSS, and whoops. You've got the border radius here. You've got the fill, and nothing really here. Basically, everything you see on this page that doesn't look like this, everything that looks nice, is done with CSS. You cannot do that with HTML. Well, you have to do CSS. So first off, let's do something really basic. Let's say we want to change the background color of our file. The way you do this, okay, we're going to open this in browser. The way you do this, right? You've got to think, I'm going to expect the element on this one because there's nothing here. So on Safari, it's like developer tools. It's pretty easy to spot, but it basically allows you to inspect the source of the element, but in real time kind of thing. So you can hover over these things to see where things are and change them and do whatever you want to them. You can even see the styles that are applied. This is your style area. There's none, so these are just default styles. So there's our header and our nav and our UL, and there's our LI with all their list items in them. And there's our main with our section and header. Let's say we want to change the background of this. You see that there's a body, and the body is the first thing. You've got HTML here, but we really want to manipulate the body. Now in Google Chrome, you can see the blue box. It goes away when I hover over it, but there's a blue box here, and then there's an orange outline. The orange outline is the margin. So if I go over to here and type in margin 0, you see all of a sudden that orange is gone. And we should be able to do the same thing with padding, although it shouldn't be any. Yeah, there isn't any, so we don't even need that. So you can see now there is no gaps either side, but there is a gap on the top. Now if we inspect the element, you can see that this UL here, the body says no, there's no margin, but inside the body, this UL is in fact causing that the gap at the top of the page. So if we click the UL and go element.style and then go margin 0, see now the site, everything on our page bumps right up. You can see that blue box there is at every corner of the page, other than the bottom, but basically where it hits, there's no gap in between the side of the page. We're going to do this in CSS, because obviously the user doesn't want to do that. We have to do that for them. So we're going to type in body. Now body is targeting this. It's saying, hey, everything in this gets this style that we put here, unless something in body also has that. So let's say we give the body margin 0, but we give header margin 100 pixels. The header will have a margin of 100 pixels, and everything inside the header will have a margin of 100 pixels, but everything that is not in the header will have a margin of 0, because this says, okay, everything in the body, oh wait, no, header doesn't want that, so we're not going to give it margin 0, we're going to let it do what it wants. Everything else, though, is going to stay what we set it to in the parent. So we're going to call these parents from this point onwards. So this is the parent of all the elements in here. I don't think I covered elements in the last one, but you have a section, and these are your tags. Everything inside section is the element. If it's a one line, like there are examples, BR, there is no closing tag for that, so there's no element. This is the tag, that's it. This is the opening and closing tag at the same time. So we're going to target body. Let me just take that off there because it's making noise. And we're going to do curly braces. Some of you have probably seen curly braces in different languages. This basically means that everything we put in here now is going to be part of the body. Everything we put there, any rules we put in there, is going to be set to the body. So we're going to type in margin, just like we would in Chrome. To close that rule, we have to put a semicolon after the value. Now margin, there are a couple of rules like this that do the same thing. You can have multiple values in there. Right now this is giving margin 0 to all sides of the body, and obviously the body has 4 sides to it. What about if we wanted to add a padding, or a margin, sorry, of 16 pixels to the top but none anywhere else? There are 2 ways we can do this. There's actually kind of 3. First way is the shorthand. Now with margin, if you enter in 2 values, like if I enter in 1 pixel and 0, this is going to assign 1 pixel to the top and bottom and 0 to the left and right. If I give it 4 values, that's going to give 1 pixel to the top, 0 to the right, 0 to the bottom, and 0 to the left. It works in a clockwise orientation. But if you don't want to do the shorthand, you can do margin top, and we're going to give it 16 pixels. You could do that if you wanted to, and you could just do above it here, you do margin 0. I wouldn't recommend doing the margin top like that, just because I think it's quite messy. So we're going to stick with, if we want 1 EM on the top, then we do it that way. We don't know, so we're going to keep it 0. But when we go through to lesson 3, we will be doing more and more complex things, which will include that. Padding is also the same. We're going to go through what margin and padding is in a second. First, though, what's probably the most important thing that I've completely forgotten about is linking the CSS. Now, in the first episode, I told you guys that you put things in the head, like links to style sheets and links to JavaScript libraries. This is that time. What you want to do is you want to create a link tag. Now, a link tag is one of the few tags in HTML that doesn't actually have a closing tag. There are a couple, and this is in fact one of them. So you don't want this one to have a closing. It's just like that. You can, if you want to, for formality's sake. If you want to, you can add that / at the end, but it doesn't make any odds. We want to add a style sheet, so we're going to do rel for relevance, and we're going to put in style sheet. This is going to tell the browser, hey, this file I'm linking you to, you need to apply its rules, so it then understands that it's CSS, because you can have different file types. It doesn't have to be a .css. As far as I know, it can be a .txt, and as long as you pass in a relevant style sheet, it doesn't care. It'll just open whatever file you give it. And then, much like the A tag, we're going to give it an href, and we're going to type in, I think the microphone's rubbing on my shirt there, sorry, and we just give it the link, and as isn't in a particular folder, it's in the same one, we're going to do style.css. And now we have this body margin 0. You can see that I've reloaded the page and the margin is back. But if I reload the page again, margin's gone now, because this has been taken into effect. Like I said before, what about if I want to add a little bit of margin top and bottom, but I don't want any left and right? Then you can do that. Bang, like that. See, there's 16 pixels of orange on the top and bottom. If I want it the other way around, that is fine. You can do that as well. So basically, adding this margin 0 1 EM here, you can see now we have a little bit of a gap each side. 16 pixels either side. We're going to keep it 0. Now what we want to do is, you might want a different font, or you might want to just increase the overall font size of the website. So if you want to do that, you can do font size, and then in here you can give it a value. You could give it 5,000 pixels if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, because now it is absolutely massive. There's your text there. That's actually one of the links, I think. Yeah, there it is, look. If you wanted to do that, completely up to you. Nobody would ever go back to your website afterwards, but if you want to do that, absolutely fine. Yeah. But we want to just make the size a little bit bigger, so we're going to do 2 EM. That's basically going to set it to 32, because it's by default 16 pixels, at least I believe so. Really doesn't matter though. 2 EM looks nice. If you think it's too big, doesn't matter. You don't need to know the specific size really, if you're just making a short website. But 1 EM is almost positive 16 pixels by default. Does vary by browser, which is 100% positive. I know that Google Chrome is 16 pixels, but other browsers might have set their default font size to something else. Up to them. But I'm going to set this to 1.3 EM because I think a little bit too big. That's a nice size font there. You might want to change your font family, which is basically your font. So this is Google Fonts. So if you want to change your font family, your font type, then you can get it from here. You can't use any font. The font you get has to be web friendly. It has to be one that is actually supported, which is why you can use Google fonts, because these are fonts made by both the community and Google themselves, and they allow you can add them to a collection. You don't really need to, and you basically get an import here, and you just can copy and paste this into your URL, into your CSS, right at the top, and now you have that font. And then we can set the font family of the entire website to that font. So now we have this font. We reload, so now we have a different font. One thing to take into account though when you're using these fonts is how long it's going to take for your page to load. This is because each time, like if I add all of a sudden different things, you can see it's going to take 24 milliseconds for my page to get these fonts from Google. Because it's not Google's fault, but there is a limit to how fast the internet can go. And on average internet, it's going to take you 144 milliseconds to load that, because I've just enabled every single type. And now you can see this is a lot longer, because we're not just getting the normal one, we're getting the thin version with the italic, and we're also getting the light and the italic and the normal and the italic and the medium and the italic and the bold and the italic, basically getting each different combination of fonts. There's quite a lot already. I'm probably going to use italic, so I'll get that. And on my digital tech website, which I showed you earlier at the start of the video, I had bold text, so I might keep the bold versions, but not the medium. I might keep the bold and the normal. So that's basically how you use Google Fonts. We're going to get rid of this. So what about now, let's say you wanted to change the, as you can see, this doesn't look very nice right now. Because what you've got is you've got this text right up against the side of the page. It looks pretty unfavorable, doesn't look very nice at all. And we did discuss previously that we wanted the UL to get rid of this, to get rid of the margin on that as well. The way that CSS works is there are a few ways of selecting things. Now this body here, this is a selector, right? And a selector in CSS is basically a tag. Now there are other ways of targeting something. We can, I think I remember in the first episode talking about IDs and classes as tag attributes. So you could type in class equals, and then this is how an attribute goes. It's the attribute name followed by an equal symbol, and then in quotation marks you want the value of that attribute. So we could give this a class of header or an ID of header. Doesn't really matter. In this situation, it's completely unnecessary. So if we wanted to target this, there are many ways we could do this. Most people would just, when they first start CSS, they say, okay, header, and then they're going to put in here their stuff. Whoops. and then I put in there their CSS for the header, and then they'll go, okay, now I'm going to do the UL, and I put my stuff in there. Bad, really, really bad, this one in particular. If you have a website, chances are you're not just going to have one unordered list on the site at any one time. Facebook and things, or any social media site, they're not just going to assume that that's not going to happen. Most, if not all, professional websites make sure that that won't happen by using CSS selectors that are particular at what they're going to select. Right now, we're just saying UL, which means if we put another UL in the main, this could be a blog site, right? Like WordPress or something like that. And the user might have put in a UL. They could have, and they could have put in some list items and put some stuff in there, and then any styling that we do, because the UL on WordPress, I'm fairly certain, I mean the navbar, sorry, is a UL. So any styling that they apply to the navigation bar is all of a sudden going to go to the users, so they're going to have a little mini navigation bar where they actually wanted a list. Really, really bad. What we want to do is want to say to the CSS, I want to get the UL inside of the header, and only that one. We could, if you wanted to, give this a class of navul. I'm going to do both so that I can show you how to use classes and parent selectors at the same time. So I'm going to go into header. We don't really need to target. We could, if you wanted to, do body header. Completely unnecessary, because more or less everything you target with CSS is going to be in the body, so that doesn't really matter, and all that does is make it more specific. I'm going to talk about that problem in a minute, because it is an issue with people starting out on CSS. They don't realize this, and I'm going to tell you guys what that is in a minute. So we've just opened up the header prematurely, and we want to target this UL. Now, chances are we're not going to have anything in the header that isn't in this nav. We could, in theory, get rid of this nav, but like I said, the Google bots look for the nav, but we want to look for the header as well, because we want to make sure that we understand that that area in there is the header. Could, in theory, have other things, but we're only going to target the UL. So we're going to go straight into header UL. What this is going to do is it's going to get every UL that's inside the header, and it's going to apply the styling that we put in here to it. Certain situations will call for you to use specific selectors or children selectors, and the way those work is a greater than symbol. So we're saying header and then greater than symbol UL. It doesn't mean that header is greater than UL. What it means is that the UL that we select has to be a direct child of header, which means this won't work, because we look at header. The UL, though, the UL's direct parent is nav, not header. The nav's direct parent is header, but the header does not have a direct child of UL, because it's in the nav child. So if we do this, it's not going to work. We would have to go nav UL. And this is very specific, almost unnecessarily so, because chances are you're not going to have another UL in your header. If you do, then you would have to do something like this, but even then, you still don't need these child selectors. It's kind of overkill. Header nav UL is fine. So, okay, I'm going to go into the header, and I'm going to look for a nav. Oh, I found a nav. I'm going to look for a UL, and the UL could be in 10 different divs. It could be in a div here, and then it could be in another div, and another div, and another div, and it would still find it. But if you use the children select or child selector right here, then it has to be the UL that is inside of the nav. Not a UL inside of a div inside the nav. That UL and that UL only. If we have a div here with a UL, this will not get targeted by this CSS. I can't emphasize that enough, because it is a big issue that people face, and it is really helpful to know how to use this. Sake of simplicity, not going to use them now, because we're not going to have another UL on in the header or in the nav for now. So we're going to do margin 0, and now that should have gotten rid of everything, and we did put that one there as an example. Matter of fact, before I reload the page, I just want to show you that this is working by going, see the UL? It has the yellow there, the yellow where the bullet points are, that's the padding, and the orange at the top and bottom, that's the margin. You can see that in the header, though, we do not have that. We only have the padding, because we didn't get rid of the padding, but we got rid of the margin. But the margin's still here on this one. So that proves that this is working. If we just do UL, then you'll see that the margin, oh shit, we got rid of it. You can see the margin is gone from this one, but if we made a new UL, oops, if we made a new UL and went into main section and we hovered over this, you can see that the margin is also gone from this one. So we don't want that, because chances are, if we targeted this, we're going to do other things as well. We're going to give it colors and hover effects and button styles, and the user doesn't want that. So adding this level of specificity gets rid of that. So now the margin is there on this one, but the margin is not there on this one, which is great. Right, so I did tell you guys that I would talk to you about margins and paddings. So we're going to do that now. So what exactly does margin 0 actually mean? We're going to make an example right now. I'm going to make a thing called a div. Now I haven't talked about divs, but a div is basically a container. I mean, it's a div, so it's a divider. You can divide a page up using a div, and that would allow you to, rather than having just lots of things, you can target, okay, this is like a little window, or this is a pane, or like on Facebook, for example, you have your friends area, and then you have your news feed, and then you have a little sidebar. Each of those would be a div. If you right-clicked on the page and went inspect element, you would see hundreds of divs. We're going to use a div here today. Now a div is a display block. I'm going to get into that after I've made this box. So if I go main.box, you could also do div.box if you want to be specific. We can open this up, and we can do width 200 pixels, height 200 pixels, and background color blue. We could also do color, which is the text color, and set it to white. And then if I just go, hey, this is a box, and reload the page, see now we have a blue box on the page. This orange here that you see, that is the margin. The orange on the page there, I can't mouse over it because it'll disappear, but there's orange here. That orange is the margin. And we can't get rid of that margin by doing margin 0. It won't work. The only way we can get rid of it is by doing a thing called display inline block. And again, I'm going to get into that when I do the rest of it. I'm going to get rid of that for now. So this is what I want you to think of. Padding. If I add padding of 1em, you'll see that the box, all of a sudden, all the text in the box moves. You can actually see it there changing. And you might be thinking why that text up there is changing, and that's because the box is getting a little bit bigger and it's causing the scroll bar, which is moving the text. So the paragraph isn't being affected because we're targeting main div.box. So padding is the inside of the box. You can see that the actual box gets bigger. It's no longer 200 pixels by 200 pixels. I'm hovering over it and you can see that div.box is actually 241 pixels by 241 pixels. Interesting, right? What happens if I add a margin though? Well, if we add a margin of 1em, then you see that now the box is 16 pixels away from this, and 16 pixels away from this, and anything underneath it will also be 16 pixels away from it. So margin is the space around an object, and the padding is the space inside the object around its contents. So if I have loads of text, you can see that this is straight up against the side, but if I change this to padding, you can see now there is 16 pixels between this text and the actual sides of the box. So padding is inside, margin is outside. You might be thinking, well, what about if I want another box? I'm just going to copy and paste this because it doesn't really matter. What happens if I want another box? Why isn't this up here? The reason it's not up there is because this margin is taking up the whole screen. To change this, we have to give it a display. Now, there are quite a few different displays. There's inline, which stops width and height from working. As a matter of fact, padding doesn't even work as it should, and margin is a little bit funky. Inline doesn't really accept those, but if we do inline block, you'll see that all of a sudden they're the right size now, but they're next to each other. So they're both 200 pixels by 200 pixels, and there's a tiny gap between them. Why are they bunched up? And that's because if we hover over them now, there is no margin. This is a 200 by 200 pixel box. But if we get rid of this, it's a 200 by 200 pixel box with a lot of margin to the right of it to say, nope, nothing else can be on this line, just me. Display inline block basically says, yeah, somebody else can come next to me, I don't mind. And then if we add a margin of 0 on the top and bottom, because it doesn't really matter, but let's say we wanted a margin of 1 next to each box, we can do that. Or even 0.5, so that way it's 1 total, because each box will have that 1 EM. As you can see, it's each box. If we give this 1, then there's actually going to be a 2 EM gap in between each of these. This is 1 here. That is basics of margins and padding, as well as display. So you've got block, nothing can come next to me. Inline block, sure, something can bunch up. And there is also a display none, which means I'm not here, you can't see me. And display inline is what an A tag uses. This is why these two are up next to each other. Margin does actually work. I don't know what I was thinking. Margin works fine. Padding, on the other hand, doesn't always work as expected with certain elements. But of course with this it does. You can see it's overlapping that test. But if we give it an inline block, it doesn't, and then we can just get rid of the width and height, and it will act. It'll be the same size, rather than overlapping the A tag, which is a little bit weird. It doesn't. These are inline, which is why they're right next to each other. You might want that, completely up to you. This is also what we're going to do to make this navbar look really nice. But next lesson, this is all going to be gone. We're going to be starting from scratch to create our own website, and we're going to slowly go through and change basically everything. We're going to make up our own website from scratch using CSS and HTML, and we'll also delve into JavaScript later on. I'm going to create a playlist for you guys, and each video will take you through a step. So we're going to start off with a basic layout, and then maybe another video will be like, oh yeah, let's add this, and then oh yeah, let's add this, and we're going to create a website together on YouTube, so you guys can see how to do it yourself, and understand how to put the elements and things that I teach you into a website. Not just know how to use them by themselves, but know how to combine them to make a really nice looking website. So thanks for watching. I'm going to see you guys in lesson 3, hopefully. If you didn't understand anything in this video or in lesson 1, please watch them back, because if you come into lesson 3 and you don't understand, you're going to have a hard time, because I'm not really going to be stopping and explaining things if I've already talked about them prior. I won't be talking about how to use IDs and how to use classes, because I have already mentioned them. And just to make sure you guys remember, if I have a dot, it means this is a class. If the div here had an ID of class, an ID of box, then I would target it using a hash. If it didn't have anything, then I just do div. It'd still work because we don't have any other divs. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know in the comments what you did and didn't like about this episode. Share it on Facebook if you want to, let people know that I'm here, and subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss another episode. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.